In a year of black swans, an embattled world has to stand up to the unpredictability of President-elect Donald Trump and the vulnerability of his policy options. His trademarks of anti-globalization, anti-elites, anti-establishment,
we must replace the present policy of globalism,
and provocative remarks on Taiwan are a wake-up call.
坚持一个中国原则是发展中美关系的政治基础。
Will politicians in emerging markets choose to forgive him in the coming Trump era? Can an ideologically divided Latin America present a shared society to resonate with President Xi's inclusive Belt and Road Initiative on co-prosperity?
打造互利共赢的命运共同体。
And can Russia and China join hands through President Putin's Euro-Asian Economic Union to rebalance the U.S. pivot to Asia? Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Yang Rui in Beijing. Russian President Vladimir Putin is in Japan to talk with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe about economic cooperation and the long-standing disputes between the two countries over the Russian-controlled Kuril Islands. Russia has resolutely refused to discuss the question of sovereignty over the island. So what kind of a compromise might be acceptable to both leaders and their countries? Is Japan hedging its bets against the possible difficulties from the coming Trump presidency by attempting to ease tensions with Russia? And how would China view closer cooperation between Russia and Japan in the context of current maritime security issues? To discuss these issues and more, I'm very happy to be joined in the studio by Jia Xiudong, Senior Research Fellow with the China Institute of International Studies, and Anna Tangen, author and commentator. We shall also cross over to Professor Takasato Watanabe at Doshita University and speak by telephone to Alexander Lukin, head of the Department of International Relations at the Higher School of Economics in Moscow. Welcome to our discussion here, gentlemen. President Putin ended up canceling a scheduled trip to Japan due to Japan's objection to Russia's stance on the disputed islands, as well as their support for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. What has changed to allow the visit to go ahead at this point?
Yes, the visit has been cancelled once, but earlier this year, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe presented kind of a so-called a new approach to the dispute between Russia and Japan, and he hoped that this will, be acceptable to Russia, and he was quite confident several months ago that they may the two sides may come out with some kind of compromise. So that's why I said a few months ago the Russian side announced the visit first, and it was then planned for December, but so far we haven't heard any major progress or compromise between the two sides, but this visit is going ahead anyway.
What is it that has allowed this visit to take place despite all the difficulties?
Well, quite frankly, I mean, it looks as if Shinzo Abe is beginning to be a little bit desperate. Let's kind of take a review. It's not only this particular things. He's the first member of the Group of Seven to actually invite Putin for a state visit. Yes, he was in Sochi, but he's the only one. He ran over to meet Donald Trump during a period when you have a sitting president. This is a huge break in protocol. He's doing this at the same time that you have Germany and France voting to continue with the sanctions that are going on. Another break. So it seems that he's willing to kind of push us on.
He's the first Japanese Prime Minister to visit Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, yes, he is, but I think that's more of a sidelight than a real desire to say that he was sorry or anything like this. I mean, he's skirting along, but my point is, it seems a little bit desperate. I mean, I'm reminded of this image showing that Putin, there was this puppy diplomacy going on, where he gave an Akita, a very rare, beautiful Japanese, loyal Japanese dog, to Putin, and he was proposing giving him a second one. Putin said no, but then for the press's delight, he had this dog perform tricks, and he was snapping his fingers, and the dog would jump up and down and things like this. So here you have this image of a very strong leader who's showing that he's completely in command and control. I don't know that this is necessarily reflecting very well on Shinzo Abe.
Putin has characterized the lack of a peace treaty between Russia and Japan as an anachronism. But aside from that,
design and release a joint communique. We said that the former Soviet Union would like to return 2 of the 4 islands back to Japan. Of course, 2 smaller islands, which only account for about 7% of the total area of the islands. But later on, there was kind of twists and turns in the relationship between Russia and Japan, and so far it seems that President Putin will not be in any mood to make any compromise with Japan over the sovereign issue. But I believe that Putin and Russia would like to have closer economic relations with Japan. It needs Japan's investment in its energy and infrastructure and industry, and it needs to diversify its markets for the export of oil and gas. So Japan will be a very good economic partner for Russia. And also I believe that because of sanctions imposed by the United States and Europe, and Putin seems that Putin sees Japan as kind of a place where it can make some kind of breakthrough the sanctions imposed by the West.
Hello, Professor Watanabe.
Hello,
70
yes.
years
Thank
on,
you.
no peace treaty has yet been signed by Japan and Russia. This time around, do you think the 2 leaders will be able to bypass the issue of a peace treaty and deepen their cooperation in areas such as energy cooperation? What do you think will happen? What are the deliverables?
For Mr. Abe, he wants to continue his post as Prime Minister for another second term. So he wants to have the political result through the negotiations with Russia in the post of Mr. Putin. However, for Mr. Putin, he needs to have money and technology to develop northern part or Japan Sea area of Russia. So both have the common points for other benefit. However, the United States want to have some split between Russia and China through these negotiations. So this is a little complicated. So even if the 2 leaders meet together and talk directly, I don't think that there will be much progress as far as the territorial issues are concerned.
Well, message is clear from your side, Professor Watanabe, that there won't be any solution to the territorial disputes. But given the economic sanctions that are still maintained since the annexation of Crimea, what can be achieved actually between Japan and Russia? Do you think Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will run the risk of President-elect Trump in moving ahead with whatever practical projects between the 2 sides?
Prime Minister Abe, frankly, he is not well informed on the economic relations between Russia and Japan. So tomorrow, the economic leaders of Japan will meet President Putin and they will talk directly. However, Mr. Abe wants to have the stance that he started these talks, direct talks, and also Mr. Abe wants to give a positive signal to Mr. Trump as the leader of the Asian area. So, but this is wrong, which could not be realized without China and Korea, both Koreas I mean. So this is very complicated. I don't think that it will have the concrete result through the talks of this time.
Thank you very much. I will get back to you in a few minutes. But Mr. Jia, President Obama made no secret about his anger on the alleged Russian intervention with the presidential election campaign. An independent committee has been established to probe into the allegation that hackers may have stepped in and influenced the results of the election through weekly leaks or whatever. But all signs indicate that there could be a rapprochement between President-elect Trump and Russian President Putin. The chemistry between the two could be better than between Obama and Putin. And therefore, do you think this visit, the ongoing one between, paid by Putin, will make a sea difference and will be taken advantage of by Washington to drive a wedge and to alienate Moscow from China? This is a major concern from the Chinese perspective.
Well, actually, I don't think so. Yes, there has been indication that under President-elect Trump's leadership, the United States may, improve relations with Russia. We know that Trump nominated, Tillerson, Mr. Tillerson, as the Secretary of State, who has a very close relations with Putin and Russia because of their oil and gas, oil investment relations. But actually, China is not concerned over, improvement of relation between the U.S. and Russia. And even it's very difficult, or it's impossible for the United States to drive any wedge between China and Russia. And the two countries have very firm foundation, politically, economically, and strategically, for their bilateral relations. So the ties are so close, and both sides have shared interests. Not only bilateral, but also they have similar or identical views over global affairs, over the future of the world order. So the United States simply cannot change that. Also, actually, in the United States, many people, many politicians, opposed to any rapprochement between the United States and Russia. Even now, some senators have called for, to try to host a kind of hearing over the nomination of Mr. Tillerson as Secretary of State because of his very close relations with Russia. And there are people against the improvement of relations with Russia because of still the issues of Crimea, Syria, and also the human rights and so on and so forth. There were many difficulties, in the relationship between the United States and Russia.
All major powers have their own independent calculations about the national interest. Putin's case, and do you agree that his ambition is to bring Russia back to the center stage of world geopolitics, and of course to have a revival of the Russian economy, which was seriously decimated due to the drop in oil prices as well as economic sanctions. Now, do you think with the recommendation of Rex Tillerson and indeed the chemistry, which was pretty warm between the leaders, Trump and Putin, Washington in the next 4 years will help Russia achieve that kind of goal? What do you think of the trust, if any, between Washington and Moscow in the next 4 years of Trump's presidency?
There's no such thing as trust.
You don't think so?
This is a cynical game that's being played by all sides. Really, the U.S. is turning to Russia because it feels that its strategic interest is to continue to prevent China from rising. Russia is obviously economically very damaged because of the sanctions. They're not going anywhere quickly, especially unless there's a rebound in the price of raw materials, including oil. So it's very safe to work with them economically at this point against the stronger. I mean, in China, they have a game called Landlord, where it's 3 players and 2 are always playing against 1. And this is exactly what we have here. The U.S. is trying to reverse what was in essence a China-Russian combination, which was threatening the U.S. mostly because of things that the U.S. had done. So I really, this whole meeting, everything that we're talking about, tempest in a teapot for now. I do not think these are not just some Republicans. These are the ranking senior Republicans who head the most powerful committees at both the House and the Senate, and they are opposed. And you also have a ex-presidential contender, Marco Rubio, who said he's not in things. So I don't, this is just a little sideshow. I don't think anything's going to happen.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Russian President Vladimir Putin is currently in Japan to talk with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe about economic cooperation and the long-standing disputes between the 2 countries over the Russian-controlled Kuril Islands. When we come back, we'll take a look at how China responds to the current issue, whether China will be betrayed, and will rapprochement between Washington and Moscow move ahead. Stay with us. We'll be back. Welcome back. Let me get back to Professor Watanabe. Hello. Is it true that
Thank you.
Psychologically the Japanese became so worried when China surpassed your country to become the 2nd biggest economy, and our territorial disputes over Diaoyu Islands have only reinforced your concerns about the fast economic expansion as well as geopolitical rise of your biggest neighboring country, China? And therefore, to isolate and to contain China, if you could, has actually become the major issue on the agenda of your Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who is likely to assume, to take the office for another term.
For Mr. Abe, he wants to solve all the territorial issues with China and also with Russia. However, in case of Russia, it is so difficult because United States want to have the route to come to the Japan Sea area through the disputed areas. So Russia knows this. However, also Russia want to have more money and technology, advanced technology from Japan. So this issue is more complicated. But in case of the Diaoyu Islands, this is in the process of talking internationally and also domestically in Japan. However, Mr. Abe's cabinet ministers and himself, they were not well informed on the international balance of power. So this is also not so easy. However, for the people of Japan, they are expecting Mr. Abe can solve those 2 issues. But politically and also internationally, militarily speaking, both are so difficult. Abe is put into a lone wolf place.
Many people, Professor Watanabe, are familiar with the 50-year colonial rule by Japan in Taiwan since the defeat of the Qing dynasty towards the end of the 19th century. Now, I'd like to know your immediate response to the telephone gate between President-elect Trump and Tsai Ing-wen, leader of Taiwan. We know that you are concerned about the future of a weak Taiwan, whose military is far more inferior to the mainland military build-up. In that case, what are your considerations about Taiwan? And do you think by the time Mr. Trump takes office, and if he and his team continue to make provocative remarks about the future of Taiwan, because President-elect Trump says he's considering whether it's worthwhile to adhere to the principle of one China. He wants to have more concessions from mainland China about the BIT, for example, negotiations. So what do you think is the position of Tokyo?
There are two things that I want to say. The first one is the personal one. 45 years ago, I went to China to call the Chinese table tennis team to Japan. It was the gate of opening the relations of diplomacy between Japan and China, between America and China, and also reorganization of the world order. So in that case, Japan Table Tennis Association agreed that we don't continue the formal negotiation with the Taipei Chinese table tennis team. So this is the principle even in the sports. However, Mr. Trump, next president of the United States, he phoned to the leader of the Taiwan as the next president of the United States. So this is completely wrong. This is wrong because he doesn't know on the international arena's movements. And also, he does anything according to his intuitive understanding of the world. If he put into the official post, he will be changed by the expert types of the diplomats and politicians of the international affairs. So I am not so worried about that. But now he can do anything, but he is wrong, I think.
Thank you very much. Let me cross over to Alexander Lukin, a professor of international studies. He is in Moscow and he's on the phone. Let's talk to him about how he looks at the telephone gate. Many, not only in China, but those observers in Taiwan argue that this island is being used as a pawn in the chess game in the prospective economic relations between Washington and Beijing during the 4 years of Trump's presidency. So, Mr. Lukin, what do you think of the Russian concerns on this sensational headline-making story?
Well, the Russian position, first of all, has been always quite clear that we believe in one China policy, and it was the position of the Soviet Union from beginning from 1949, and it hasn't changed since then. But your disagreements with the United States is not a Russian problem. This is a discussion between you and the United States. The United States also had this policy from 1972. And speaking as an expert, I can say that if the United States or the new president wants to change this policy, he'll have a lot of problems. First with China, and second with other U.S. politicians.
Right. We know very clearly, Mr. Lukin, the position of Moscow about the one China, Taiwan is part of China. Now,
yeah.
the issue at this moment is a lot more Russians have expressed explicitly their note of optimism in the future of Washington-Moscow relationship with Putin assuming presidency, because the chemistry between your President Putin and his American counterpart elect looks pretty warm, and therefore, given the economic sanctions that were imposed by Washington since Crimea, Moscow has every reason to believe it's now time to improve the relationship, to mend the ties between Moscow and Washington. Do you think this is a good reason for Beijing's concern?
Well, I think that first, it is true that Mr. Trump's positively about Russia, and I think it's a good thing, because Russia should improve relations with the United States, and we hope that President Trump, when he becomes president, he actually does at least part of the things that he said, and that would be very positive. Second, I think that China should not have any concerns about that. Actually, China, if you read, for example, some Chinese writings, for example, a famous article by Fu Yin in Foreign Affairs, by a well-known Chinese politician. Then on Russian-Chinese relations, you can see that China actually has concerns about very bad state of Russian-American relations.
Okay, Mr. Lukin, the last question is very much about the outcome of the current visit by your president in Japan. Something got to be achieved. There should be a breakthrough, if not a dramatic.
It will not be resolved because it's too complicated and the Japanese don't want any concessions on that. But in the sphere of economics, we're progressing quite well.
Okay, thank you very much.
So that would be my prediction.
Well put. So are you optimistic that Japan will become more independent from Washington in the next 4 years, given the unpredictability and uncertainty of Trump's foreign policy?
No, I don't think so. And Japan has never been, very much independent. It doesn't have a kind of a real independent foreign policy. And the United States always expects Japan to support the U.S. policy goals, not vice versa.
Your take very quickly.
I think it's going to be a little bit of a cooling down simply because people cannot rely on Trump and therefore they have to look for alternatives.
Thank you very much. That's the end of our program. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.